Hey everyone, Two Brain Cell here, and I'm back this time with a video on playing AP Flex in set 7.5. The set is only a couple days away from release, and AP boards have gotten a lot more versatile compared to the previous set. In this video, we're going to be going over situations where you can play AP, itemization, early game boards, and final compositions. The identity of AP comps this set is similar to that of last set, where the majority of late game AP boards revolve around Tier 5 Legendary Dragons. As such, when comparing AP and AD, I like to think that while AP has a higher cap, it's hard to play every game and requires some conditions to be met in the early game. Let's go over situations where you can play AP. An obvious one this set is when you get a Lagoon opener. Lagoon is one of the most important traits to have early right now because of the boost it gives to your economy, as well as how well it scales if you can reach the later loot rewards that give components and full items. Even if you don't stick with the trait into your middle and late game, even getting to 90 stacks of Lagoon will already have given you 9 gold, a component, and a reforger. If you think about it in terms of shimmer scale, that's like getting 1 proc of Draven's Axe. This is in conjunction with Taliyah, who's an amazing AP item holder and a great Lagoon stacker, especially once you activate mages. Another scenario where AP is viable depends on which Mirage variation it is this game. Daeja was really the only 4-cost AP carry last set, and though we now have Sohm, Daeja still retains her spot as a solid AP option when the Mirage is right. Now, I'll readily admit that I haven't played through the different Mirage variations and the different variations of Daeja this set to know the strength of each one. But Iniko, a top player in NA, compiled a great tier list and a write-up of all the champions in set 7.5, which I'll link here. I won't go too in depth, but in essence, it looks like the Mirages where you have to play Vertical, Warlord, and Dawnbringer are weaker than those where the second activation of the trait is enough. Finally, you can play AP when you have a high chance of being able to get to level 9. These situations are sometimes hard to judge, but with augments like Level Up, Tiny Titans, and late game specialists, you can reasonably expect yourself to sacrifice HP in the earlier mid game to bolster your economy and push yourself to level 9 so you can more easily access the legendary dragons. AP itemization is pretty flexible, and there are a lot of interchangeable items. The nature of AP comps is such that every fight is a timer to see whether your carry can get enough casts to kill the entire enemy team. And the advantage of AP comps compared to AD ones is that spellcasters often have backline access with their damage compared to auto attack based units. As such, AP itemization usually revolves around 1. Casting as often as possible, 2. Casting with enough damage to kill off enemy backliners, and 3. Having a frontline that can buy enough time for your carry to cast. With that said, these are the items that I like to slam. The big one to talk about first is blue buff versus Shojin, and without getting too much into the math, 60 total mana for a unit is the breakpoint for the 2 items, where the unit will need 4 autos after a cast to fill their mana bar, with the caveat that blue buff users will get a faster initial cast. This is important because Sohm, one of the premier AP carries this set, has 60 total mana. And because most of Sohm's damage is on its 3rd cast, blue buff is a more optimal item for getting there. However, they've also provided 25 bonus AP to Shojin, which kind of shifts the power balance in its favor in a lot of situations. And on top of that, you'll see how many of the items on this list use a tier, and committing 2 tiers to an item is sometimes difficult because of how many other premier items use the component. Shiv is an item that I love, and one that I think a lot of people underrate. The 50% MR shred is super impactful, and it uses a bow, which is a little bit difficult of a component to get rid of in AP comps, and it doesn't have to be placed on your main carry to retain its effectiveness. Heal cut is essential to most boards, and AP comps have the flexibility of using either Sunfire or Morello, especially with a much larger cast of Morello users compared to last set, including Sohm, Daeja, Namzi, Kaisa, and Zyra. Protector's Vow and ZZ Rot are both excellent stalling items. They add a lot more resist or, stall a lot more time for your backline users to cast. And finally, Warmogs and Stoneplate are great tank items for teams that are running fewer frontliners. Most mage comps run fewer frontliners or solo frontliners. So these items make your few frontliners extremely tanky. Moving into early game boards, you might remember that last video I only used 1 and 2 cost units in my early game, but with AP comps there are a few 3 cost units that are pretty integral, so I'll have to include them, and I'll try to give you some options if you can't find them early. AP, similar to AD, uses 2 premier item holders in the early game, Taliyah and Karma. Let's start with Taliyah. For me, when I play AP, Lagoon is my most comfortable opener. And that's because even though the early game board isn't very strong, the scaling nature of Lagoon makes it so that I'll always be able to hit my econ intervals, and I feel like I'll always have good itemization. On top of that, even though this comp doesn't really come online until you get mages in, Taliyah's ability makes it so that you can almost always kill some units in early game fights. This means that you can manipulate your stage 2 to lose streak while maintaining relatively good HP. As we can see in this level 4 board, we prioritize getting Lagoons in first, as well as slotting in a Skarner for a little bit of extra tankiness. One thing to know about Malphite's ability is that because he starts with max mana, he'll always cast right at the beginning and not move because of it. This makes it a little awkward sometimes because your other frontline units will walk around him, and thus making any tank items you put on Malphite a little bit obsolete. This is why we put Skarner in the third row, so that it gives Malphite time to cast while also being the one to take aggro first. Moving on, if you can hit a Silas, which is one of the integral 3-cost units that we talked about, then at level 5 you can slot mages in, and this is when this comp really starts to come online. Silas with mages is one of the best tanks in the game. The Mana Reave is super impactful, and he's extremely tanky with a double shield. Taliyah, as always, is stacking up the Lagoon, and Kai'Sa is a great item holder for Morello. If you can't hit Silas early at level 5, one other option is to slot Karma in, which gives Kai'Sa Dragonmancers while maintaining the same frontline as earlier. Moving on to level 6, hopefully you can hit Silas by this point so that you can activate mages, and if you can, replace your Kai'Sa with a Seraphine, who's a really powerful unit right now with the shielding she provides, while also being a great Morello holder because anyone affected by her ult can apply Morellos to the enemy team. Rakan is also always a great slot-in unit because of the CC that he provides. Him being a Mystic just adds a lot of tankiness to the entire team. You can see, however, that this comp does rely on a lot of 3 costs, and even assuming that we can hit Silas, if you can't hit Seraphine and Rakan, then staying with Kai'Sa plus Karma is a perfectly fine board to go for. One final thing to note is that Seraphines only applies to all units within 2 hexes, so positioning her in the middle between your frontline and backline is really important. Finally, at level 7, just slot Zyra in, which gives Evokers for more Seraphine casts, Whispers, which is really good for the MR reduction if you don't already have Shiv, on top of Zyra just being a really good unit in her own right. Moving on to Karma boards, I personally don't play this all that often because I find it a little bit risky. Without Lagoon to bolster your econ, as well as provide a smooth transition into Sohm, you're kind of playing for Daeja if the Mirage is good, or finding an Asol or Shin on level 8 so that you can stabilize and go to level 9. However, it is a very strong early game board that takes advantage of some really strong traits, and you can definitely win streak with it early. At level 4, you take advantage of the lowered activation trait for Dragonmancer, as well as playing Jade and being able to play Jax, who, like we said in the last video, is one of the strongest early game units and is a great holder for tank items. Moving on to level 5, you can slot in Bruiser to make the team just more beefy and buy Karma more time to get cast off. Moving on to level 6, there's a little bit of a shift where you can take out Bruiser and play 4 Dragonmancer, which is interesting because not only does it give Karma a lot more hitting power, but it also adds in a Morello holder in Kai'Sa. Alternatively, at level 6, you can swap your set with Lee Sin and slot in a Qiyana in order to get Tempest in. Moving on to level 7, if you are playing the 4 Dragonmancer variation, then slot Bruisers right back in to add more tankiness and also provide a nice ZZ Rot holder in Malphite. Finally, let's take a look at our endgame boards, starting with Sohm variations. Sohm comps usually take advantage of the tankiness of Mage Silas, as well as the stall power of Seraphine and Zoe, so that Sohm can get to his 3rd cast burst as often as possible. This version runs 5 mages, which is the smoothest version to run because you're sort of running this board the entire game until you hit a Sohm and then you transfer your items from Taliyah to Sohm. One note is that Seraphine is interchangeable for Nyla in this composition, especially if you find another source of heal cut in Sunfire and if you need more backline access. However, another version of this comp is to run 3 mages while running both Seraphine and Nyla, which lets you run stronger Lagoon units than having to run Taliyah in your endgame board. And while this does lower your Sohm's DPS, it is a lot tankier because you can add a Bard and there's a lot more AoE CC. Finally, if you get a Lagoon spat, you can run 9 Lagoon, which spikes your AP significantly, while being also able to spike your Lagoon stacks quite a bit so that you can get those higher loot rewards. Taking a look at Daeja Boards, like we said earlier, you'd rather not have to run more than 4 Mirage, and both versions of the board I'm going to show you only run 4. This version is Guardian Daeja, which I really love because of the tankiness it provides. It stalls so long for Daeja to get multiple casts off. The Guardian Shield is great, the Mystics is really good, and Seraphine also provides even more shielding and stall time. The other version is Cavalier Daeja, which is very reminiscent of last set's Daeja build. I don't like this build quite as much, not only because it's a little less tanky than the other one, you're not able to run 2 dragons, but also because you don't get to make use of solo tank items quite as well with multiple Cavaliers. Moving on to our Shin Boards, I want to preface this by saying that this board is definitely difficult to hit, and it's hard to play this every game, but if you do get to this point, it's extremely powerful. This comp takes advantage of the splashability of Mystics this set, as well as a nice little combo between Idis and Rakan, which provides both Guardian and Mystic. You also slot in a Lee Sin, not only to add Tempest, but also CC to your team, and this comp can stall forever, allowing your Aoshin to cast and wipe the entire board. Another variation is if you need a little bit more damage, you drop the Bard and you add Yasuo, which also provides Dragonmancer, and the AoE knockup and AD damage is really nice. Finally, if you get a Shimmer Scale Spat, you can run Zoe instead of Bard, so that you can run 5 Shimmer and potentially have a lot more gold income. Finally, looking at Asol Boards, you'll see that the structure is very similar to an Aoshin board, and that's because both comps operate in the same way. You want a really strong front line with a lot of utility and CC, so that your backline carry can either cast once in the case of Aoshin or many times in the case of Asol. Because you don't need to put Tempest in, you can slot in a Jace who, like we said last video, is one of the most splashable units in the game right now because of the damage boost he provides as well as his AoE CC. Another version of this comp is when Namzi is an Invoker and you're able to play 4 Evoker with Namzi, as well as getting the 3 Dragon bonus. This comp is really cool, and Namzi is a really good secondary damage threat. Finally, similar to Aoshin, if you get a Shimmer Scale Spat, you can run a 4 Guardian version of this comp with 5 Shimmer, which is also really interesting and does definitely boost your econ a lot. Thank you everyone for watching the video. I really hope you enjoyed this guide on AP Flex. And a quick shout out to Tactician EU, who's a top rated player from EU Northeast, and a lot of the information I get for these videos is from conversations I have with him about the game. Hope you enjoy the educational content, and I'll be back soon with more of it.